dementia is Alzheimer's disease. However, few people realize that dementia can impact younger adults. In fact, the #1 form of dementia for people under 60 is a disorder few of us have ever heard of. Susan Simon joins us now with more. Susan?
Eric, it's called frontotemporal degeneration, or FTD. It attacks the part of the brain that affects speech and personality, and it is frequently misdiagnosed as depression. The majority of cases happen in patients between 45 and 64 years old. Given the devastating toll that this takes, more needs to be known about FTD, and that's why an Iowa County family is sharing their story.
In 2010, he actually came to me and said, something's not right. I don't feel right, something's not right.
What did he mean by that?
He could not verbalize it. He just said something is not right.
Rita and Chuck Trevorrow live in the small community of Livingston and have 2 grown children, daughter Alyssa and son Kyle. How long have you been married, Chuck? Do you remember how long you've been married? It's been a long time.
20 years.
It'll be 29 in August.
29.
At 56, Rita says Chuck started losing interest in work and family activities and displayed behavior that was out of character for him.
With the FTD, you often see, and we saw a lack of empathy, OCD behaviors that got kind of extreme at times, having to constantly check the mail. Like there was one point where every 3-4 minutes, check to see if the mail was there.
Just the lack of motivation to go out and do things. More of just wanted to be home and wanted to be by himself, and kind of just went back in the bedroom. And I mean, there's some days where he would just lay in bed for hours upon hours.
Rita took Chuck to the doctor, who diagnosed him with depression.
She was sure that this was the worst case she'd ever seen, and she wanted to put him in the hospital, have electric shock treatments done. We switched doctors again and started with another doctor. And he took a couple years adjusting meds and just kept adding meds on, just more meds, more meds, more meds. So we're about 5 years into it at this point, and I just kept saying there's just something that's not quite right.
Eventually, Chuck and Rita went to a neuropsychologist and waited 11 months for an appointment for cognitive testing.
And they did like 5.5 hours of cognitive testing. It's a full day's worth of testing. That's basically when they told us that he had the frontotemporal degeneration, or frontotemporal dementia.
Did you think, well, that's not possible, he's in his 50s?
I did, because they kept doing the Alzheimer's screener. Well, he always scored 0. He always came out as nothing for Alzheimer's. Well, that's the only kind of dementia that anybody really knows about right now. Even in the medical profession, they're not that familiar with FTD.
Why don't we know more about this?
Yeah, I think it's because, first of all, we're not doing as much research on frontotemporal disease as Alzheimer's. There's not as many people.
Dr. Robert Probelski is a geriatric physician who works with FTD patients at UW Health.
We're in the dark ages of these neurodegenerative diseases. I mean, we've been studying Alzheimer's disease for over 100 years, and we still don't know what these proteins exactly do.
Dr. Probelski says the Trevorrow's story is a common one.
Usually it's not the patient saying something feels off, it's the family saying something feels off. They're in a restaurant and mom says something she never would have said before about the waitress, things like that. And unfortunately, the patients are usually the last to, if ever, have a sense that there's anything wrong.
Unlike Alzheimer's, where memory loss is the first troubling sign, people with FTD often have no awareness that anything is wrong. Today, there is no treatment and no cure.
Their loved one is going away. They're gone. They're not the same person they married or knew when they were in high school. So it's devastating any way you cut it.
How are you doing?
I'm doing okay.
You seem incredibly strong.
I have 2 great kids that help a lot.
Yeah. The Trevorrows are taking things one day at a time and say Chuck's diagnosis has made their family stronger.
Now we cherish those little moments that before maybe you wouldn't think anything of, but now when you have those good days or those good little moments, you really appreciate that.
What do you see coming down the road?
That's hard because every person with dementia is different. It's really hard to plan for down the road. It's really hard to know where this journey is going to take us and when.
There is a lot more information available online about FTD, and we have links to 2 organizations on our website, channel3000.com. And my thanks to Chuck and Rita for talking about this, because it is not easy, but they did it in the hopes that maybe someone will hear something and think, that sounds like what we're dealing with.
You hear about
maybe it'll lead them there.
You hear about early onset Alzheimer's, but you hadn't heard about this before.
All right.
This will raise some awareness.
I hope so.
It's nice to have you in tonight. So
Thanks.
Thanks for being here. Let's turn to Gary.